Good evening and welcome to today's meeting of the Governance and Ethics Committee. I'm Councillor Tom Marino, the chairman of the committee. Before we start, I'd like to explain for the benefit of the members of the public who may be watching that today's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present and COVID compliant in the council chamber. I can confirm that those present in the chamber are sitting socially distanced and are thus permitted to remove their face mask while seated. In addition to myself, the other members of the committee in attendance are councillors Jeremy Cottam, the vice chairman, Jeff Beck, Tony Linden, Andy Moore, Graham Pask and Claire Rolls. We also have parish council representatives on the committee. I now take the opportunity to give thanks on behalf of the committee for the valued service provided to the Governance and Ethics Committee over many years by our former representatives, councillors Barry Dickens and Jane Langford, and the substitutes, councillors Lord Cottam and Roger Hunneman. I'm also pleased to now welcome our two new parish council representatives on the committee, councillors Bill Graham from Shore-cum-Domington Parish Council and David Southgate from Buckby Parish Council. I look forward to their contributions. There are also two substitute parish councillors on the committee, councillors Anne Budd from Hampstead Marshall Parish Council, who is in attendance to observe the meeting, and John Down from Hungerford Town Council. To clarify, the parish councillors are permitted to speak at the meeting, but they are not permitted to vote on the items. Joseph Holmes, Catalin Bogos, Sarah Clark, Shannon Coleman Slaughter and Julie Gillespie are the officers who will be advising the meeting. Jack Karimi is the clerk to the meeting and Stephen Chard is the Zoom host. Ian Murray from Grant Thornton is also in attendance for items 5, 6 and 7 on the agenda, the annual governance statement, the going concern assessment and the draft financial statement highlight report. If he wishes to address the committee, we will have to suspend standing orders to allow him to do so. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed? Great, so move on to item 1, apologies. Jack, have we received any apologies?
We've received apologies from Councillor Rick Jones. Councillor Graham Pask is here as substitute.
Right,
and I've just, Chairman, to intervene. I've had one other apology from Councillor David Mars just received.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. So moving on to item 2, the minutes. Are the members willing to accept the minutes of the previous meeting as a true and accurate record? And do they have any comments? Councillor Linden.
Yes, Chairman. On page 3, 28 minutes, it stated that I wasn't present at the meeting in February, and I'd like confirmation, please, from Stephen that I was late at the meeting, but I did attend. And then I've got something else.
Go on.
And then on page 6, at the second last paragraph, my surname was spelt wrongly. So again, Stephen, can confirm that. Yeah, you okay, put Lindon. So if I ask Chairman that for Stephen to confirm that.
Yes, Chairman, absolutely fine to make those amendments as suggested.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Does anyone else in the room have any comments? Do we have anyone who's phoned in who wants the opportunity to speak? Okay, no. So with those amendments, do I have a proposer for those minutes? Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Linden. So members, please indicate by raising their hands if they agree those minutes are a true and accurate record with those amendments. Great, thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just clarify that it's only members who are physically present in the council chamber who can vote? So I noted that Councillor Beck had raised his hand, but for kind of the purposes of transparency, it is only members in the chamber that can physically vote on any item.
Great, thank you for that, Sarah. Okay, so moving on, we have declarations of interest. Jack, do we have any declarations of interest?
We've not received any declarations of interest.
Are there any from the floor? Okay, brilliant. So move on to item 4, the forward plan. Officers and members, do they have any amendments they'd like made to the forward plan? Julia, I can see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I've noted that reference GE 4093 should state Q3 rather than Q4.
Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else like to raise anything? Okay, so I believe we're just noting the forward plan, aren't we, Stephen?
Yes, you do, Chairman. Thank you.
Do we need to vote on that?
No need to vote. Just while I'm speaking up, there are a second set of minutes to approve, Chairman, the 4th of May. So
Yeah, I saw that in the chat, so I will move back to that. So the minutes for the 4th of May, does anyone have any comments or amendments they want made on those? Brilliant. Great, thank you. I will. Yeah, can we vote on those minutes, please? Okay, brilliant. Thank you. I'll sign both of those. So we can move back to item 5, the annual governance statement. I believe Joseph Holmes will be introducing this report.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. And in front of us, we have the annual governance statement for the 2020-21 financial year. This is an important requirement and forms part of our overall financial statements, which we will come on to a little bit later on, but those are due for sign off for approval for audit by the end of this week. The annual governance statement sets out some of the key areas of governance that we want to focus on for the year ahead, as well as looking back on those key areas from 2019-20 as well. You can see on there that we have retained some of the items from the previous year, for example, in respect of asset management, as well as reshaping and changing some of the newer key issues for us from a governance point of view for 2020 on, and we will continue to monitor those in the year ahead.
Brilliant, thank you, Joseph. In accordance with paragraph 7.12.4 of the Constitution, I'll be proposing from the chair that standing orders are suspended in order to allow the external auditor to address the committee if they wish to. Can I have a proposal for that? Brilliant. Sorry, second it. Yep, that's great. Everyone vote on that, please. Brilliant, thank you. So do any members wish to speak on this item? Councillor Cotton.
A couple of questions. If we go to page 24, 5.9.
Councillor Cotton, your microphone switched on.
Is now. Okay, sorry, I'll repeat that. Basically, reference page 24, 5.9, section improving weak asset management. What remains to be done now, or what are we doing, please?
Chairman, I can answer that one. So there was an update to the previous committee on this, and some of the internal audit actions are due for final completion by sort of July, August time. So it's kind of where we are at the moment. So we are just finishing off those actions. For example, there was one around asset challenge and some of the other asset issues relating to the financial statements for this year, which we're finalising. So they go back to when the original internal audit was done, and then as part of that follow-up, some of the recommendation timescales were changed. So I wanted to keep that in the annual governance statement because they all hadn't been completed as at March 2021. So I wanted to make sure that it remained in here. So it's a key focus for the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Excellent. Thank you. Second question, if I may. If we go to page 25, I'm not sure if it's exactly where we are where we're looking to. But what about the monitoring and valuation of current portfolio? I see where we're intending to remove the portfolio issues of commercial properties because that's now not allowed. But will we have a mechanism in place to actually monitor the position of those assets that we did purchase?
Yes, so thank you, Councillor. And yes, so we will, even though we have stopped new asset purchases through that scheme, we continue every quarter to meet and convene our sort of property investment board to make sure that we're monitoring and managing those assets so they continue to give us a return. So even though we've ceased new purchases, we continue to monitor those regularly.
Thank you, Chairman. I consider these quite a high risk item, obviously, because of the pandemic, etc. So will that be coming back to our committee on a regular basis?
Yeah, I can respond to that one through you, Chairman. So that audit itself was a one-off audit as part of the internal audit arrangements. However, the committee now has Treasury management within its remit, and one of the areas sort of included as part of our investment strategy is around commercial property. So if members of the committee wanted an update around how the commercial property portfolio is performing, then we can add that in with the Treasury reports which come through to this committee.
Thank you. I would.
Councillor Pask?
Chairman, just on that last point, I think it is important that we do get updates on a fairly regular basis, especially if the information is being produced anywhere.
Okay, can we note that, please, Joseph? Does anyone else from the floor want to raise any points on this item? No, I can't see any virtual hands either. Just a couple of things from me. So on Appendix A 1.4, this is just for, but yeah, I think.
From which page?
Page 27, 1.4. I think following a corporate peer challenge led by the Local Government Association, November 2019, should there be an in or something in there?
Yes, you're quite right, Chairman. We will amend that one. 1.4, there should be an in there. You're quite right.
Sorry, and then in a similar vein, 6.6. Just find the actual, I think third line, page 30. Should it be investments plural?
That's investment.
Yes, we can amend for that, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry, and then last one. It's not a grammar from this time. 6.5. So it says that though not all the actions are complete, it's been removed from the AGS. Can I just get confirmation on who signed off on that decision, and will there be any scrutiny of it going forward, even though it's being removed?
Yes. So thank you, Chairman. So obviously, as it says here, the executive approved the new strategy, and I think as part of the annual governance statement previously, that was highlighted as one of the key actions that came out of the Local Government Association peer review, was to get that strategy in place. And I think as the strategy came through to executive last year, already some action had been taken on that. So in my view, when putting this together and sort of proposing it to members, we had already, from a risk point of view for our governance arrangements, we'd already made progress against that. Now, clearly, if the committee thinks over the next year which goes by that not enough has been done around that strategy, then that can get brought back into the annual governance statement for future years.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. So I believe that's everyone in the room, and there aren't any more virtual hands. So I need a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation as set out on page 21 to approve the annual governance statement. Is that final proposal?
So proposed, Chairman.
So, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Lindsay. Can everyone in the room please vote by raising their hands? Great. Jack?
Yes, that's been carried.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to item 6, just want to go back to the minutes of the 19th of April very briefly. Just want to, there was a matter arising, just asking members to formally note that Councillor Jeff Brooks has replaced Councillor Jeff Mays on the Constitution Review Task Group. Great, thanks. So moving on to item 6, the going concern assessment as at 31st March 2021. I believe Shannon Coleman-Slaughter will be introducing this.
Thank you, Chairman. In front of you, you have the going concern assessment as at the 31st of March 2021. Essentially, this document sets out the section 151 assessment of the going concern principle, i.e. can the council cover all its obligations basically from its assets base and its income within the next year. The key elements within this report to look at are probably section 4.2 onwards. I will draw your attention to 4.2e as a key element, where we reflect on the fact that the council actually in its draft statement has a negative balance sheet. The negative balance sheet is a direct result of the pension liability that has increased substantially between 1920 and the year end at 2021. However, setting out, going through the rest of this, looking at the MTFS, and our reserves position, which is increasing our cash flows and our asset base. The assessment is that we continue to operate on a going concern basis, i.e. we can meet all of our financial obligations.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Shannon. Standing orders will remain suspended in order to allow the external auditors to address the committee if they wish to. Do many members in the room or virtually have any questions of the officers or auditors that they wish to ask? No, I can't see any virtual hands either. I must admit there aren't really any comments from me either. So on the basis of the section 151 officers assessment, it's proposed that this report is provided as a working paper to the external auditor confirming the going concern assessment has been completed, and that the conclusion maintains the assertion that the council is a going concern as at the balance sheet date of the 31st of March 2021. I need a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation is set out on page 37.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillors Linden and Cotton. Can I ask all members in the room to vote on the recommendation by raising their hands?
That recommendation has been carried.
Great, thank you. So moving on to item 7, the 2020-21 draft financial statements highlight report. I believe it's Shannon to introduce the report again for us.
Thank you, Chairman. The draft financial statements report that you have in front of you, it should be read in conjunction with the going concern assessment that was the previous report that we went through. This takes us through our current financial statements in greater detail, particularly looking at 4.2 again, that picks up on the pension liability and the reasons why the pension liability has significantly increased as set out by our actuaries. It also further then takes us down through our reserves and shows you our basic reserve movements in unusable and usable reserves throughout the financial year to give you the year-end position.
Okay, great, thank you. So do any members virtually or in the room have any questions or comments? Mr. Councillor Linden.
Thanks, Chairman. I was going to raise it in another meeting, but it was late in February. On page 68, on 3, the District of West Berkshire, the district residents predominantly reside within the main market towns of Newbury, Thatcham and Hungerford, but also a quarter of the population live in the Reading West constituency of West Berkshire. And I just wondered whether it would be useful, it's a suburban area, that in future we include that into our report, because it's a quarter of our population. And I think it's important to be recognised where it is. I mean, obviously, Newbury's got slightly more population, but the town of Newbury, but I think it's important that we do cover that area. I know it's in the geographical part of Reading, but it is in our eastern area of the district. So I'd like a response on that, and then I'm going to ask another question on number 4.
Josie, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you. Okay. There we go. Yes, apologies. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we can add that in. I'll take it away with colleagues as well as to how we get that better reflected in our corporate communications in documents such as this.
I think you need to turn it back on. You have another council. You have another question, Councillor.
Yes, thank you. The other one is just something I might be wrong on, but I just want to raise it. The council was created as a single tier unitary authority after the dissolution of Berkshire County Council. The boundary of the council corresponds with the boundary of former Newbury District Council. Now, maybe my memory is wrong because I wasn't on the council at that time because I lost my seat in 1995, didn't get back till year 2000. Because I got a feeling that we were founded in 1974 and the functions of the Berkshire County Council were added in 1998 when we became a unitary authority and we changed our name from Newbury District Council, which I was a member of, to West Berkshire Council. I just wondered if what is our legal position on that? Because obviously we need to be correct if we're making these sorts of, where we are in terms of population. Because I've got a feeling that all we changed was we got the extra powers. Now, I could be wrong on this, and I have discussed it with another member in this room, but in another place. But I might be right or wrong on this, but I just wanted some confirmation on that, possibly from Mrs. Clark. Thank you, Chairman.
Joseph, you'd like to take that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We'll take that away and have a look at that statement. I can't. Well, I wasn't in local government at that time, but we'll take it away and have a look at it, Councillor Linden.
Thank you.
I've got David Southgate first, and then I've got Councillor Cotton, and then Councillor Moore.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Given this is my first one, could I just ask a point of clarification? So on page 51 onwards, you have a summary statement where you look at positive, neutral and negative impacts. There's nothing negative, yet later on page 68, I think you list 7 items that are red. So I'm just trying to understand in terms of what this particular summary is telling me, when later on in the report it suggests that 7 items in terms of actions are red. So I suppose in that concept, I might expect some of these to be negative.
On for you, Joseph.
Yes, thank you very much for that. So the report, which is further to the back of these papers, is the report which this committee has seen before. So it's just an appendix to this overall report, which is why some of the comments there haven't been reflected in the risk management section, because when this previously came to the committee, we had an action plan to address some of those items. So that's why they're not highlighted again here for the committee. But yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Cotton.
Thank you. Yeah, just a point of information for my esteemed Councillor Linden. Yes, it was a transfer taking over 98, 99, because I was chairman in 2000. First one, but no, it's the second. But the major point here is we picked up the Berkshire County Council debt, and we also, of course, got their pension fund too. That's a nice surprise for us.
I know all about that.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's been checked.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that people at home won't be able to see me because somehow or other I don't seem to be connected to Zoom. It's a question really on the pension fund deficit, and really a question as to whether that's seen as likely to improve this financial year or worsen. And if it stays the same, what sort of action is necessary to be taken on the deficit there that we've got?
We'd like to field that, Joseph, again.
Have I got to?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I'll respond on that one. So as you can see, the pension deficit has worsened, and we have a negative balance sheet, as Shannon indicated, which we haven't had. And it's difficult. The pension fund is run on our behalf over at the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. So difficult to say if that position will worsen in the short term over the next few years. There is a deficit recovery plan there, though. So we make additional pension contributions every single year to reduce that deficit. Some of that deficit, though, arises because of wider market conditions, going up and down. As we know, it's been a very difficult financial year in the last year. So I would hope that we would see some bounce back in respect to that. But the overall pension fund itself, as well, is subject to evaluation every 3 years as well. And at that point, a decision is made about how much additional or not contributions need to be made to continue to pay back that deficit, which is in the pension fund. So, but has a really significant impact, as you highlighted in the financial statements.
when you say every 3 years, what's the timing on the next review of that?
I think off the top of my head, I think it's next year. I think it's 2022, but Shannon may well correct me. But I think that is the next triennial valuation.
Councillor Linden.
Yeah, I can report because there was the Berkshire Pension Fund scheme has been late, but I understand some good news through from the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service and also the committee, its committee, which I'm vice chairman of, on the audit and governance, that it has improved for future years. So we don't have late reporting. So that is good news that things has been sorting out in terms of audit.
Great, thank you, Councillor Linden. I can't see any more hands in the room or virtual hands. Just two quick ones from me. Page 57, 7.1 in the beginning of the conclusion, it says it's anticipated that the draft financial statements that will be produced by the extended deadline of 31st of July, obviously that's this week. So just wonder, are they pretty much done, ready to go, pen and paper, that kind of stuff?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I reviewed them last week. They're with the graphics team at the moment, just for sort of final checking. But we've been able to certainly as Section 151 officer, I've had a couple of weeks to review them, which is positive. Make comments back, working with the team as well in getting those produced in what has been quite a difficult time to pull them together.
Thank you. And then finally, just on 7.5 on page 59. Mentions of writing out of assets from the accounts where the ownership or existence of the asset couldn't be substantiated, about £4.2 million worth. Do we have any examples of that? Because obviously there's examples from before you mentioned obviously the Waterside Youth Centre, but are there any sort of examples of the ones where they couldn't be substantiated? I don't know who wants to take that.
I can take that, Chair. That is predominantly looking at some very old ICT equipment that had stayed on the asset register that needed to be written off. And there was a couple duplicate assets in there, which that refers back to that original external audit plan about having a review of our fixed asset register and tidying it up. So that was undertaken.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shannon. So yeah, I can't see any more hands virtually or in the room. So as the recommendation set out on page 51 of the report is to note the report only, there's no need to vote on the item. So we will move swiftly on to item 8, the internal audit annual assurance report 2020-21. And I believe it's Julie Gillespie who's going to introduce that for us.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report is my annual report, and I'm required by the public sector internal audit standards to produce an annual report. The main purpose of the report is to give an audit opinion on the control framework. And that's how effective I think the control framework is. And the key paragraph of the report is 5.7. And in 5.7, I'm saying that I conclude that reasonable assurance can be given again that the control framework remains robust. So that's the key message of the report. And that opinion is based on the audit work that's been undertaken during the year. And the summary of those conclusions of the work is in section 5.12. So there's a table there, and that's giving the number of opinions by each category. And as you can see, there's more in the satisfactory and well controlled than there is in the weak or very weak opinions. So that is the basis of how I come to my opinion. And then we go on to some of the areas that I've highlighted where there's been weaknesses previously. Under section 5.14, I'm saying that there have been a number of weak opinions that I've previously reported to committee. In the fourth quarter of the year, there was a new audit that was given a very weak opinion. This was a grounds maintenance contract management. And I'm saying there that there were known issues in this area. We were asked to look at it. So it's not surprising that the control opinion has come out as less than satisfactory. Section 515 is listing the key areas of weakness that we identified in that report and why we came to that opinion. We also undertook follow-up reports during the year, and there was 3 that were unsatisfactory. At the last committee meeting, I gave you the details of why 2 of those were unsatisfactory. They were to do in property services. And in the final quarter, there was a 3rd one that we identified, which was Section 106 agreements. So Section 5118 of the report is identifying the key areas that are outstanding. The relevant managers are attending committee tonight and they're going to go through those points with us. But I was going to leave that until I've covered the rest of my report. So we'll go back to that bit. And the other key area section of the report is the audit team and resources and performance, which is on page 82. And there I'm mentioning that we've got a key performance indicator of 80%. Last year, we achieved just over 81%, which is a lot lower than the previous year at 94%. But the key reason for this is that how I calculate it is based on posts. And one of the posts was vacant for longer than I'd planned for or envisaged, in which case they, it wasn't, the measurement's not on actual people in post, but on the planned number of people. And that wasn't correct, in which case it looks as though we were underperforming. Whilst if I adjust the percentage for those people actually in post, it was nearer to late 80s, early 90%. So it wasn't that far adrift from the previous year. The section 5.23, that is where I'm listing the planned work that was agreed as part of the audit plan for that year. And then there's a column with the actual timeframes. And you can see there's quite a bit of difference on some of these. The key differences are to do with COVID related work, which couldn't be planned for. And we're also undertaking investigations. So they were the key differences for the percentage. And they're the key items of the report. So I was just wanting to go back to the unsatisfactory follow-up, the section 106. So we've got the service managers here. And if they can just say we carried out the follow-up, they had made progress on there was 8 recommendations, they'd made progress on approximately 50% of them, but there were these 3 key areas that I'm listing where they're outstanding. So the managers have come along to explain what future action they're going to do and progress to date. So I don't know who wants to start, because there's people from planning, but there's also Joseph as the chair of the capital.
Some of the officers wanted to present some stuff before we move on to members. So I don't know who wants to go first. Joseph, if you do want to go first, that'd be fine.
Yes, so thank you, Chairman. And just in respect of 5.18A, we actually only had a capital strategy group last week where we had, actually a couple of weeks ago, where we had a full report on those contributions available and making sure that we are managing those effectively year by year to ensure that we can apply them to the capital programme and ensure that action is completed and an important action the internal audit raised.
Any other officers want to present anything before we open up to the questions from members?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of words. The sorting out of the reporting, we had a new government requirement to feed back on both section 106 and SIL. That had to be done by December of each year. And last year was our first time of doing that. So that was given priority and we met the government's deadline and we published, and that is available on our website. And in relation to the final item about section 106 agreements, they have gone down in number from 106 in 2013-14 to just 11 last year, and currently this year to date 1. As SIL has taken over, section 106 have gone down in response. And in addition to that, where we were charging £75 a time for any requests, somewhat creatively, members of the public, agents, etc., are now going to the Freedom of Information and requesting that data through freedom of information requests that they get free of charge.
Great, thank you, Brian. Any more officers before we move on to members? I can see that Councillor Beck had his hand up for a while, so. Okay, that's great. So yeah, I've got Councillor Beck first.
Right, thank you, Chairman. With regard to on page 87, the ground maintenance contract, the report is very weak. For the benefit of one or two members may not be actually completely aware of this, but that is a joint contract between West Berkshire District Council, Newbury Town Council and an external contractor. Could somebody give us a clue as to why we seem to have got a very weak report on this? That sort of comes out of the blue to me.
If I can answer that, Chairman, I don't think it's out of the blue. I think there's been ongoing issues since the contract commenced. And our focus is internal, so our focus is on how we're managing it. And as the key points there are procedures in place to manage it. They're not as effective as they could be. And they're the key criteria there. I mentioned there's supposed to be a database. It's a complicated contract. There's an awful lot of specification of the contract of the service provision. To be able to record and manage that, a database would have been a very useful tool, and it wasn't established. So that was a key component that wasn't in place. The service are doing checks for quality and making sure compliance, but they're not always recording it. So that there's no management information or for a manager to look at it and give an overview of what's going on. So to me, they're quite key things that should be part of an effective contract management process. And that's why it came out as very weak.
Could I, through you, Chairman, could I ask, I believe, I may be wrong on this, that contract is due for renewal probably within 2 years. Is that correct?
That sounds about right. Offhand, I can't say offhand, but that sounds about right.
The other thing is, through you, can you give us some reassurance that we are, we have obviously had management problems in scrutinising and sort of keeping our eye on this contract. Are we now in a situation that we are in control?
We completed our audit. We've made the recommendations. We will follow, and they're all agreed. All the recommendations were agreed. We'll go back in 6 months. Actually, it was issued in March. So after the 6 months after March, we'll go back and carry out a follow-up. Then that will come back to committee, and we'll be able to say whether it's satisfactory progress or not to give you that assurance. But yeah, the managers are very positive with the comments that we came up with, and they're all agreed. So hopefully that they're making progress with them.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor and then I've got Councillor Rolls. I saw your physical hand up right at the start, Councillor, and then after Councillor Beck. So you want to go, then I'll take Councillor Rolls after.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased that Julie's come back with us to ground maintenance contract. On the Development and Planning Capital Programme Boards, SO 106 is weak. Are you going to come back on this as well?
That's up to committee to decide if they wish us to do a second stage follow-up. We normally only do a first stage. But I don't know if you can remember the two ones in property services where they're unsatisfactory and the committee wanted me to carry out a second stage. We could do that here. But the key issue that I had that was outstanding, Joseph's already responded to that and they've already put it in place by the sounds of it. It was the need for reports to go to the capital strategy group to actually oversee the management of the funding of the pot. So if the other areas were not as significant, that was the one that needed action. So I'm comfortable, but it's up to committee if they want further assurance on it.
So your advice is at the moment that that we should note that because there is progress at executive director level.
That's my view. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you, Chairman.
I've got Councillor Rolls.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just regarding Julie, your comments in terms of in the conclusion that it's your opinion that we have a robust process. Can you sort of reassure the committee how we benchmark ourselves against other local authorities if we do that? And also, I'm aware that I've raised this before, where there is a statutory provision for the audit team to be sort of externally audited, just to check that those checks and balances and the approach is correct, because obviously we are not experts, particularly in audit, I would imagine. So how can we seek reassurance that you are being kind of scrutinised as a team by that benchmarking or externally?
The external assessment is benchmarking. That's what they're doing to a certain degree, because they're using the same tool and benchmarking every authority to come up with the opinion of whether they comply or not with professional standards. Me giving my opinion is slightly different, because what I'm giving my opinion on is the individual audit work that we've done and how we've come to that opinion. The professional standards behind that, yes, if there's an issue with our professional standards, then I suppose I could be giving you false assurance. But then if I was giving you false assurance, the whole framework of our internal audit function would not be working properly. And that's what the external assessment carries out. And also the external auditors are provided with copies of our reports each year. They can see our scoping, they can see what we've looked at, and they can see how we've come to our conclusions. If there was anything significantly wrong with our approach, I think it would have been highlighted by now.
Sorry, can I just have a follow-on question, Chair? So on the assessment, is that you feeding in your opinion of where we are, or is it actually, sorry, I don't follow how the external assessment works. Could you just explain that a bit more?
Yes, sorry. So the external assessment either has to be a totally external organisation. It could be another local authority where we could ask them to come and review us, or what we did last year was we asked SIPFA to do it. So it could, a professional accounting body. They're totally separate, totally independent, and they have a set criteria of what they're looking for and all the supporting evidence. They basically audited us. That's what they're doing. They've got their criteria and the measurement, and you can either have fully conforms, partially conforms, do not conform. And we've got the fully conforms. So from my point of view, that's my assurance that I'm doing an effective job and doing it appropriately according to standards. In which case, you know, that opinion, that assurance should also provide the committee assurance that when I'm giving you my annual opinion, that you can place reliance on what I'm saying to you because we're complying with professional standards. That's how it should work.
Okay, I've got David Southgate next.
On a similar vein to Councillor Rolls, I think in 5.9 you talk about the new process being set up in financial year 2018-2019. And then in 5.21 you talk about the external assessment was undertaken in May 2018. So I suppose my question is that actual assessment relevant given the timescale of the new process being set up? Say this predates my time, but it seems we're using something that cannot have been very long after the new process was set up, or was it actually audited before the new process was set up, as identified in 5.9?
So 5.9 is to do with the risk management process, not our internal audit process. There are links between the two, very strong links, but what I'm highlighting there is the risk management process and governance framework changed. That was not what was audited. The external audit of the audit function was purely looking at what we do, how we manage and how we comply with our professional standards. That wasn't linked into the risk management process.
So, okay, so May 2018 was the last external audit, however.
Yes, well, that was the final report, yes. And then after that, subsequently, I reported to committee, I think at least twice on progress against the action plan from that review.
Okay, I think Councillor Rolls wants to come back briefly.
Yeah, hi, it's a different question actually. Could I ask Brian Little? I didn't understand his comments around reporting on CILM 106. I didn't understand what that related to, and apologies if I missed that in the report. Could you just explain what you were referring to?
Yeah, certainly. In 2018, the government brought in legislation that required every local authority to report exactly how they've spent CIL and how they spent Section 106. And that has to be an annual report every December. And so this was the first report that we did. and that was published on our website. So that I had to prioritise the resources, and that is why we prioritised that report over what was said in item B.
So just so I'm clear, we do that every year? Or
We
this
have to do, yeah.
we've done? No, we do it every year
Yeah.
since 2018. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Judy, could I just ask, in the description of the way you've used your audit allocation, you've got COVID-19 related work as one of the things that obviously came in new. Could you just, 75 days, I assume, could you just give us an idea as to what that involved?
Yes, I can. Numerous things, actually. At the earlier stages, we were asked for advice on how to set up processes for the business grants. I was asked for advice on the community support and what processes and controls needed to be in place for that. So that was in the early stages. Then as the things progressed and continued, there's an awful lot of grants that were coming to the council. Then there's a number that need a sign off. They need a formal sign off by myself and the chief executive. So we're having to do testing to actually ensure that the grant has been spent in accordance with the required conditions to be able to sign it off. And also there were some grants, very high value grants, where there was no requirement for a formal sign off, but I thought there's a risk factor of fraud. So we carried out work on those, and that was things like the infection control grant. A couple of million into social care, no requirement for sign off, but there was potential for fraud. And central government with all these grants have made it very clear they'll be very, very strong on anti-fraud work and wanting assurance of anti-fraud controls within a local authority. So I risk assessed those and had a plan of which ones I thought we need to cover. So, and that work is continuing this year.
Thanks very much.
Okay, I can't see any more hands in the room or virtually. Just a very quick one from me. Page 82, 5.2, about 81%. Obviously, given that you've calculated that basically being a person down, so to speak, I do find it, even though it's obviously lower than it was in previous years, it's still quite positive that even, taking the being a man down, so to speak, into account, it's still over the target. So with at full capacity, and obviously, hopefully, as we move out of the COVID-19 situation, do you perceive that going back to the usual 90+% in the future?
I would hopefully. I think from the last 2 or 3 years of memory recall, it has been sort of early 90s. That's roughly where we are. But there's a lot of work. If you do planned work, we have time allocations to the planned work, and that's obviously more difficult to manage because they're like individual projects. So that's more difficult to manage and keep within the time budgets. Whilst if there's other work, investigations, they're not as, they don't have any time allocations to them. So that basically that's easier to have productive time, if you see what I mean. So it depends on the flow of work and the nature of work during a year to where I think that target ought to be. But if the level of work in the different categories stays as it is, roughly we should achieve approximately 85 to 90% each year.
Thank you, Judy. So I think that's it. So as the recommendation as set out on page 75 of the report is to note the report only, there's no need to vote on the item. So we'll move on to item 9, the exclusion of press and public. So I'm going to need a proposer and a seconder to agree that the press and public leave the room.
So proposed, Chairman.
Seconded.
Great, thank you. Can all members in the room vote by raising their hands?
That's been approved.
Great, thank you.